Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it's the voice of Chi-Town, the reddest beard in the high desert, your host of the Make It Out Alive broadcast, Sam Wilson. All right, folks, how you doing today? We are back with another episode of the MOA broadcast. Let's get right into it. Now we go back for some news. If you've seen the last two episodes, let's jump to one thing first. As mentioned before, here at the MOA broadcast, we remain apolitical. We're not going to get into our politics, your politics, or anyone else's. We just do what the news used to do years ago, which is give you the information, and then you can make your own decision and draw your own conclusion. That being said, sometimes the topics we touch on and discuss are political in nature. Again, in those cases, we just give you the facts. So, in the last two episodes, we've been covering this ongoing saga with the AP, the Associated Press. We don't need to explain it again. It's been covered multiple times. If you haven't caught the last episodes, 3 and 4, I believe, we discuss it fairly in depth there. President Donald Trump changed the name legally. He has the authority to do so from the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Whether you like it or not, that's the way it is, so we move on, right? For some reason or another, the AP, the Associated Press, they refuse to acknowledge this or to refer to it by the name of the Gulf of America. They're sticking with Gulf of Mexico. So, as we covered in last week's episode, they were barred from entering the Oval Office and Air Force One to cover press events. They had to wait outside. They're still able to access the White House. They haven't had their press credentials revoked, but they are unable to get access to those most intimate areas with the president. So, we have an update this week. Excuse me. A federal judge on Monday refused to immediately order the White House to restore the Associated Press access to presidential events, saying the news organization had not demonstrated it had suffered any irreparable harm. So basically, they had sued the White House or Trump. I don't know exactly who. I think it gets into it later on in the article. Doesn't really matter. But they wanted to get a restraining order to block the White House from preventing them from having access in those areas. U.S. District Judge Trevor McFadden said the AP had not proven harm requiring an immediate restraining order. But he cautioned the White House that the law wasn't on its side in barring AP over continuing to refer to the Gulf of Mexico, not simply the Gulf of America, as Trump decreed in an executive order. Now, he did this with an executive order along with the Department of the Interior. It was a legal name change. Again, some people are going to like it, some are not. I don't really think many of us spend that much time talking about the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Mexico. But for whatever reason, the AP has decided to get locked into this battle of wills with the White House or Trump or whoever they are doing this with. It seems pretty clearly viewpoint discrimination, McFadden told Brian Hudak, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, a government attorney. With no ruling made, the White House is free to continue barring the AP from the Oval Office and beyond. There is a case, it is promised to, or is scheduled to be heard later in March when there'll be another hearing. The White House lawyer Hudak said that just because an AP reporter and photographer had long held a place in the White House press pool didn't mean the agency was entitled to it in perpetuity. That's not just special access, that's extra special access, Hudak said, noting that AP journalists continue to access the White House and publish news from events even when its journalists are not present in the room where they happen. The president can choose who to speak with, he says. There is a hearing set for March 20 where additional arguments will be made. So I guess we will see what happens and update you in this ongoing battle of wills between the AP and the White House. Just seems like an odd thing to dig your heels at. I mean, why not just call it when you're in America, where they operate, call it what it's legally been changed to here. As we discussed in past episodes, the mapping programs, Google Maps, Apple Maps, they have changed their name to Gulf of America. I just don't see what they really gain out of this long term. I guess if they have a big victory, then that will give them some street cred or whatever, but or maybe bargaining power in future cases. I don't know, but it just seems like an odd thing. I can't remember the last time I've had a conversation about the Gulf. All right, we move on now to Memphis, Tennessee. This is why situational awareness is so important. Okay, police are searching for a man who was seen on video attacking a car with an axe following a collision in Memphis, Tennessee. Another motorist captured video showing an unidentified man wielding an axe and striking another vehicle on Saturday, February 22nd, according to police. In the video, the suspect can be seen striking the side of the vehicle multiple times before stepping away. They take their jacket off, throw it on the ground, stare at the victim, and then they pick their jacket back up and walk away. So what happened? Apparently, the suspect, the axe-wielding man, was rear-ended by another vehicle being driven by a man and his girlfriend. After the collision, the unidentified man whose car was hit exited his vehicle and began yelling at passengers before retrieving an axe. Why in the world would you have an axe in your car? And yes, he has a car. We'll get to that in a moment. I'm from the country. I use an axe all the time. I can see it possibly being there in Memphis, Tennessee. I don't know. Regardless, not illegal. I don't think anyway. But why would you go and get an axe over a rear-end collision? I mean, it's now a problem for insurance to handle. Who knows who had what, who didn't have insurance? We don't know. All we know is that he began to take an axe and chop at the car. I saw the video on the news website I went to. I wasn't able to find it. But I saw the footage on X or Twitter. If you do not have that program, I recommend it personally if you are able to, deal with seeing the raw truth out there. It's called X, used to be called Twitter. The reason I like it is you can get the raw, unfiltered footage, like we talked about earlier. I don't want some newscaster to tell me what I should think or what I should believe based on the news I see. I would like to see the raw numbers, the raw footage, or hear the raw data. I'll make a decision myself on what I believe about that. And if you watch news on TV versus getting raw footage and things from X or other places, it's shocking the amount of stuff that is just not covered. And many times you'll see footage in a news report, then you watch the whole thing on X. It has been dramatically edited, obviously with a purpose. And we're not going to get into that again. We say apolitical, but clearly some of this footage is sometimes twisted. I don't like to. I would rather have the raw data. I'm an adult. I can make the decision myself. I'll interpret it the way I see fit. And sometimes I'm going to be wrong. Sometimes I'll be right. But what I don't want is someone I've never met who may or may not have a political agenda to decide what I should hear and what I should see and what news is important to me. So anyway, that's that. In the video, you see the guy walk up and strike the vehicle at least 2 or 3 times. He busts out the front and back windshield, and I think he takes a few chops at the car along the way. To me, let's see, after vandalizing the victim's car, the suspect got back into his car and drove away. No injuries were reported, according to police. The part that stuck out to me was the people in the car that was literally being chopped up with an axe. They just sat there. Like they could have, and I don't know what exactly went on. It's hard to Monday morning quarterback things when it comes to uses of force or violent situations. You never know what's going on in someone's head. There may be other factors the video doesn't show. Who knows? But the video was taken by somebody in the car behind the accident. There's very clear video of it. And they just sit there. There's no traffic or no substantial traffic in front of them. They could have driven away. I don't know why they chose to stay there while this guy attacked their car with an axe. The first thing I would have done, hopefully, what I think I would have done is, what we call create distance. Get out of there. The guy has an axe. Clearly, he is not acting in soundness of mind in an illegal manner. Who knows what he's going to do next? But that was the part that stuck with me. They just sat there while this guy was chopping their car up. So, again, who knows what was going on in their mind and what they had. Maybe they had a plan. I don't know. But they just sat there. The suspect's vehicle was described as a 2012 Chevy Impala. Not gonna lie, I'm not quite sure that's the car I'd be willing to go to war over. A 2012, what is that, 13 years old Chevy Impala. I mean, I think I would probably just let insurance deal with it. But who knows? His decision. All right, we go to New York City. Another one with situational awareness, dealing with road rage. If you look up road rage, this is probably, I haven't ranked these things, but man, there are so many road rage incidents in the United States alone on a daily basis that it's crazy. You can take your pick from stories to go through about road rage. This one takes us to New York City. Let me grab a drink here. Okay. Irate motorist chokes MTA bus driver in New York City road rage attack after fender bender, according to officials. An irate driver slugged and choked an elderly MTA bus driver in a road rage attack in Brooklyn, according to police and transit officials. Siobhan Legal, 25, if I'm pronouncing that right, I don't know, lunged at the 68-year-old B26 driver on Halsey Street near Lewis Avenue in Bedford-Stuyvesant. If you've been to New York, Bedford-Stuyvesant explains a lot. We'll get to that later. After the two vehicles collided in a fender bender around 9:20 a.m., authorities and sources said. So I guess the bus either sideswiped or clipped him. I don't know, but it appears like it was the bus that was at fault. Not sure on that, though. Legal started arguing with the bus driver, then punched him and wrapped his hands around his neck, causing jaw and neck injuries, according to the NYPD and MTA. Keep in mind, this is a fender bender. A fender bender. Legal was arrested at the scene and charged with second-degree assault, strangulation, and criminal obstruction of breathing, police said. New York City Transit President Demetrius Critchlow said in a statement that the suspect jumped over a barrier. So if you've ever seen the inside of a New York MTA bus, they continue to improve these things over the years, but it's almost like a little mini fortress in there. There's plexiglass, and again, we'll get to that in just a minute, but that must be the barrier I'm guessing that they're referring to. When they're inside there, they have a plexiglass plate or whatever it's made of, acrylic plexiglass, to protect them from people like this. According to New York City Transit President Demetrius Critchlow, the lunatic who vaulted... lunatic. We used to use that word an awful lot more. Now you hardly hear people say lunatic anymore. It kind of dates you a little bit. The lunatic who vaulted a barrier to viciously punch and strangle a bus operator just trying to move New Yorkers around Brooklyn displayed utter disregard for humanity, decency, and the safety of passengers on that bus, Critchlow said. If you've never been on an NYC bus, driver's compartment, oh, here we go, they explain it, has plexiglass barrier, almost like an armored car. It's kind of like when you go into a convenience store in a bad neighborhood, they get that thick plexiglass, bulletproof or not, whatever it's supposed to be. That's what surrounds these little driver's compartment, these buses, because of violent assaults, and people just lose their minds and they take it out. MTA in New York City, they have amazing coverage. If you've never been, they have amazing coverage of the city. But there are delays, there are hobos and derelicts and other people that slow things down. They don't have money, they want to sleep. It can be a very frustrating process, especially if you're trying to get to work or get to some place on MTA, Metro Transit Authority. So I can understand, they want to protect their drivers. Like we talked about last week, man, New York City is getting to be more and more like that movie, Escape from New York. If you've never seen this movie, it was made, I don't know, probably 78, 82, somewhere in there. I'm not exactly sure, maybe even earlier than that. But New York City has become an island prison, Manhattan. If you're from New York, there's a scene where they're driving down Broadway to get to some location. I forget what's going on. Kurt Russell's driving this car. It's some beat up old jalopy type vehicle. They got steel bars across the windshields and windows. There's these freaks and derelicts on the street. They got to go through a whole mob of them. They're throwing Molotov cocktails and bricks and all this kind of stuff, glass bottles. And I mean, it's just like out of some kind of post-apocalyptic nightmare. And, they're going through bombed out buildings and neighborhoods and stuff. That's what New York City is really like now. It's unreal. When you see these news clips, especially on like X, where they don't just show you what they want you to see, like on some other media stations, it's crazy. I was in St. Louis not too long ago. The good neighborhoods were still fine, but I had to drive through a particular neighborhood that was definitely on the rough side, and it looked like something out of the Middle East. Some of these buildings looked like they had been shelled. I could not understand what's going on. It was like a third world country. I was shocked. Some of these buildings literally, they were just blown open, or I don't know what happened, how they got that way. But people on the side of the street, they were sitting there, standing there. It was in wintertime, very cold. If you've never been to St. Louis in the winter, it gets very cold there. Bitter winds will cut you like a knife. And so people were sitting there by, barrel fires. These 55-gallon drums are burning trash in to warm their hands. They're walking through the holes in buildings and popping out the other side, sitting there gambling, and throwing dice against the wall. It was like something out of a Charles Bronson, Death Wish movie. It is unreal what some of these cities have become in the United States. As I was leaving, this is when we knew I had someone. We were there to meet somebody and talk about some stuff. And this is when we knew it was time to leave. We saw this guy. It was in the 20s at least, if not lower, Fahrenheit. Okay, so well below freezing. There was a guy in blue jeans and boots walking down the street, no shirt, no jacket, nothing, just waving an AK-47 around. And I saw him in my rearview mirror, and I'm like, there's no way that guy has an AK-47. He did. As he started to fire shots, I knew it was time to leave. But this was broad daylight. It was around noon because we were going to get lunch. And this guy's just firing off a machine gun. And the locals that I was talking to that were with me told me the cops won't even show up. That neighborhood was bad. They won't even show up if you come. So it's crazy. Anyway, back to New York. We are grateful to the NYPD officers who rushed to the scene to arrest this guy. Now it's up to the justice system to make sure he is locked up. Now, this incident happened in Bedford-Stuyvesant, or Bed-Stuy, as they call it. It's a shame this guy didn't keep going just a little bit further out into Queens, because if he had, he could have gone to a place. I don't know if it's still open. Somebody I talked to recently told me it was a place called Sybil's. And there are a lot of Jamaicans, or were, I don't know what it's like now, a lot of Jamaicans out in that area in Queens. And if you've never had a beef patty, it is a Jamaican treat. They're delicious. It's about the size of a large Danish or pastry. And basically, it's like a flaky pastry crust filled with like spiced meat. Usually the meat on the inside is ground beef. It's got just a little bit of spice to it. The pastry, the flaky crust on the outside, has like an orange tinge or appearance to it because they use turmeric with the seasoning in that dough. And it's flaky and crispy, and it's filled with this hot spice. Not real spicy like Mexican food spicy, not real, a lot of kick, but just a little bit of spice to give it some flavor. And usually it's ground beef. I think I had it once with goat, and that was good too, but I don't recall real strongly. It must not have made much of an impression. By far, most of the beef patties I had, though, were ground beef on the inside. Delicious. Then, and this place, Sybil's, again, I hope they're open. They were great. There was you would take the last stop on the A train, which was Lefferts Boulevard, and you'd walk. I think it was only 10 blocks or so, 130 or 131st, and this place, Sybil's, on the back end there, and you would get beef patties, and if you were really hungry, you would get beef patties with cocoa bread. Cocoa bread is like this fluffy white bread that they would wrap the outside of the beef patty in. And you would get one or two of those, would fill just about anybody up. And then you would wash it down with what's called champagne cola. Absolutely delicious. I haven't had a good Jamaican beef patty in a long time. I hope they're still going and very successful and doing well. But a Jamaican beef patty and with cocoa bread and a champagne cola was... man, what a great treat. So anyway, that's the way it is. We move on. He didn't make it to the beef patties. Okay, we are going to get ready for a break here. When we get back, we're going to discuss again one of the recurring themes, situational awareness. Let's say you're walking down the street. You're walking your dog, you're whatever, taking a walk down the street. All of a sudden, you are attacked by a barking, vicious dog, pit bull-sized dog. And then, shortly after, you have to deal with an irate owner who may or may not be armed or under the influence. What are you going to do? Are you going to engage? Are you going to run? Are you going to alter the course of your future or the other person's? We'll get into it after the break. More Make It Out Alive with Sam Wilson after this.
Want to get your business noticed? Sponsor a show on KKFO Gold Country Radio on 103.3 FM and create awareness through on-air announcements, our online stream at goldcountryradio.org, and our podcasts that live on forever. Your message reaches a broad local audience while also targeting listeners who choose to tune in to the shows they love. Plus, we promote your sponsorship across our website and social media. For more information, email goldcountryradio@gmail.com. Call 541-238-6989 or visit goldcountryradio.org. Gold Country Radio, your message heard locally and beyond.
You're listening to the MOA broadcast with Sam Wilson. Will you make it out alive? All right, we are back from the break. Now, if you'll recall, before the break, we were talking about, this was an actual experience that happened to me. So one day I was walking my dog, not too awful long ago. I was walking my dog down the street, broad daylight, in town, not in some far-flung remote area, although out here at 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it is basically the wild, wild west in some ways still. Walking my dog down the street, and I saw this dog in the back of a truck, and I just made a mental note and kept walking. And then all of a sudden, it was a big dog. I don't know, some kind of a mix. I didn't get a really good look at him as far as assessing the breed. I was more concerned about his behavior. But I think he had some pit bull or something like that mixed in him. I know this big, thick musculature on his shoulders and neck, and he had that big, squared off head. Regardless, easily capable of doing some damage to me and my dog. So we were walking down the street. He came charging out of the back of this pickup truck. Immediately when he started snapping at me and my dog, I made sure we were safe. And then he was tied onto this leash to the bed of the truck. It was much longer than I would have thought. He was able to go at least a good 10 to 15 feet beyond, almost a car length basically, beyond the tailgate of this truck. And so we got close enough that he snapped at my dog's sweater and was able to make contact. I pepper sprayed the dog. That had the desired effect, and he lost interest very quickly in assaulting us any further or doing anything else violent. But before that, there had been an awful lot of barking while we were getting all this done. There was still snow on the street. We were stumbling around trying to figure out what was going on. So as soon as that was over, I made the decision, all right, we're done with this thing. Let's go ahead and get across the street and get as far away from this as possible. Once I got my dog and me across the street, though, the owner of this dog came out, and I don't even understand, some bizarre freak of logic and mental gymnastics, the owner of the dog that just attacked my dog and me was mad at me for, I guess, his dog barking or whatever. I don't think he was aware that his dog had been pepper sprayed yet. He was just mad that somehow there had been this disturbance, and I guess in his mind it was my fault. Now, in my opinion, we were about 20 to 25 feet apart, in my estimation at this point, with this man. It looked to me like immediately he was under the influence of something. His face was very red, in my opinion, typical of alcohol. I couldn't see his eyes, so I couldn't make a judgment call on that. But he was just very, very belligerent and loud for the circumstances. There was no need to be that over the top. So it's my guess that he was under the influence of something. Who knows? What I do know is I had a choice to make right then and there. And this is what I would ask you. What would you do? Are you going to engage with this person? Or are you going to, create distance, break off, and go away? And here's the way I look at stuff like this. What do you have to gain from a confrontation like that? Someone who clearly does not take care of their animal properly and is now upset that, you have been involved. You are basically the victim in the situation. And they want to pursue it as though you're the aggressor. I can tell you what I did. My number one rule in almost any kind of situation like this, create distance. Creating distance is very important. That gives you time and space to assess the situation. Creating distance means walk away, get further away, retreat, whatever you want to call it. You put space and time between you and the threat. And that's important because that gives you a chance to assess the situation, decide, what you're going to do. It gives you more reaction time if the person continues to come after you, which they did. He pursued me for several feet into the middle of the street. There's cars. This is so insane. Over a dog. That was his fault. He's walking into traffic and screaming obscenities, threatening my life, using all kinds of nasty language. And I'm just continually retreating because the question I ask myself is, what do you stand to gain if you confront this individual? I don't want to deal with the police. I don't want to deal with whatever in the world this guy's problem is, chemical or otherwise, or not. I'm just out walking my dog. I've had a number of these type of stories because where I live, there are a lot of stray dogs literally roaming in packs sometimes. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and it's not uncommon to see stray dogs literally in packs. It's like something out of a movie. And they'll come after you and attack you sometimes. They've tore up my dog's his sweater and jacket. They've tore up his skin. They've tore up my pants. We've had a number of these situations. But whenever humans get involved, you got to ask yourself, what do you stand to gain from this person who is acting in a clearly illogical, irrational manner? What do you gain? Even if you somehow have a confrontation and win, what have you won? I can't think of a single thing. And whenever I tell some of my friends or, people that I talk with about these things, a lot of times I'll hear them say something like, well, they wouldn't do that again, or I'd made sure that was the last time that happened. And I'm thinking to myself, really? Because the implications, are very clear, meaning either A, shoot the dog, B, shoot the person, or whatever else, because firearms are mentioned in these conversations. And I think to myself, do you really want to be that quick to use lethal force? Whether or not it's legally warranted or it is legally justified is a completely separate matter from, is that really what you want to do with your life? Because the minute you do that, you're starting a process. Okay, there is going to be a legal process. There are going to be legal ramifications, monetary or economic ramifications, and potentially social ramifications if you use a firearm or other types of deadly force on an animal or a human, unless it's absolutely necessary. Now, you can't tell someone what is and isn't absolutely necessary unless you're in that situation. If you ever had to review a use of force type situation, an after action report or something like that, you can't truly, do a Monday morning quarterback thing because you don't know until you're in that situation exactly what you would do. Sometimes there are extenuating factors and mitigating circumstances that would affect what you would and wouldn't do that don't show up on the surveillance footage or that don't show up in a report. You have to trust the person that is involved to a degree. So anyway, we'll put that aside. But do you really want to introduce lethal force unless you absolutely have to? It's going to be a big mess. So anyway, the point of what I'm getting at is, aside from the situational awareness there, number one, to me, I always think of create distance. To me, that is the number one thing you can do aside from preparation to improve your situation. Get some space between you and whatever the threat is. That gives you more time to react, more time to assess what's going on, and it takes them longer to get to you if that's what they're going to do. Now, aside from, as we change pages here, aside from the lethal side of things, what I much, much prefer is pepper spray. Now, you need to check in your municipality, your area, whatever, about the legality of pepper spray. If you do a quick search, you'll find that pepper spray is legal in the United States all over and universally are pretty much recognized as legal and safe. Either way, find out in your area if there are any changes to that. But pepper spray is a great tool. Number one, it's non-lethal in almost every case. So maybe there are some exceptions, I don't know. But in all of my experience with pepper spray, and I've gone through my fair share, let's put it like that, it's reversible. Nobody's dead at the end of it, human or animal. A lot of times a deterrent is better than, a final solution. So if we look at pepper spray as a solution, especially when it comes to animals or just someone other than a very highly motivated and prepared human individual. If you're not familiar with pepper spray, we're going to do a somewhat of a breakdown here and hopefully give you hopefully some useful information. In general, there are a couple different types of pepper spray that you're going to be able to find, whether you look online, you go to a store, wherever. To me, the biggest differences you're going to see in civilian pepper spray is going to be whether it's liquid, like the consistency of water, or it's a gel-based pepper spray. So let's go through some of these differences. The liquid. With liquid, which has a water-like consistency, you can have good reach on a calm day. It can be better for a fogging effect if you have multiple targets or a group or an area, that you want to target. In those areas, the liquid can be a very, very good idea. Okay, if you're using like the bear spray type cans, whether it's bear spray or not, or just the large aerosol cans, the liquid can be a good idea if you've got, like, let's say you've got a pack of dogs or multiple people or crowd control. The liquid can be good because it comes out almost like a fog, and you can cover a swath of people with the liquid. Okay, especially the larger cans. Where that kind of the trade-off you make is distance, and that's where you get into gel. The gel, and when you search for pepper sprays, usually they will clearly mark what type they are and so forth. The gel is going to have less blowback, meaning if there's a little bit of wind, it's not just going to come. If you spray a water or a liquid pepper spray and there's a lot of wind or even a reasonable mild wind, you're going to get aerosol, that dust is going to move all over the place, or that spray, okay? And ricochet. With gel, you'll have typically less ricochet because it's coming out in a thicker consistency, okay? When you start using pepper spray up close and personal, like you're 3 feet away or less, man, you can spray somebody and it can literally, I've seen the gel especially do this. I haven't used a lot of the liquid base because most of what I've done has been gel. But with the gel, sometimes it'll ricochet and just bounce off somebody and get the guy next to you, okay, or next to the target. So you got to be careful. The gel also is a little less easy to wipe off in my experience. It just kind of smears around the face, whereas the liquid can be wiped off a little easier. But the gel, in my experience, you're going to have significantly better range with the gel because it comes out in a tighter pattern and it's going to give you more reach. Sometimes that can be very, very important. The other thing with pepper spray is you want to familiarize yourself beforehand. If you buy one, buy 2 cans or 2 containers, whatever, and use one for practice. You need to go out there and target practice with it. You need to see how it behaves in different wind conditions. And frankly, it's not a bad idea to expose yourself to it in a reasonable amount to see what the effects are. Pepper spray affects people differently. Some people, it goes right to them. Other people are much less sensitive for whatever reason. Same thing with animals. I pepper sprayed some dogs that immediately they are very displeased, especially if you get them around the nose. Obviously, they have a very sensitive nose. They are in the wind. They're done. Others, it takes a minute or they're not quite as affected. So you want to see how it affects you, especially if you breathe in some of the overspray of the fumes, the lungs where it gets you. It's not the worst experience in the world. Don't be afraid of it. It's mostly just unpleasant unless you get a really good shot right to the eyes, nose, or mouth, the mucous membranes. It's not the worst thing in the world. But get a familiarization with it and see what it does to you. Aim is going to be important. It's not going to do a whole lot of good if you aim at a torso of an animal or a human with pepper spray. You want to get the mucous membranes, the ears, nose, and throat. Eyes, excuse me. Eyes, nose, and throat. The mucous membranes. Eyes are number one. The nose and the mouth area are going to be particularly susceptible to the pepper spray. The other thing is, whenever you do this, you need to understand pepper spray, it takes a little bit of time to kick in. This varies from person to person. But in my experience, you need to plan on from about 10 to 30 seconds for the pepper spray to really start acting as a deterrent to a human or animal. It isn't usually instant. Some dogs and some people respond or feel it right away. It's not at all unusual, though, for it to take a few seconds for it to really have an effect. So plan for that. You need to understand whenever you spray this stuff, it isn't like magic and it just repels someone, like the old bat spray, the shark spray in the Adam West campy Batman series. He's climbing up this helicopter over the ocean one time and the shark attacks him and he pulls a can of shark repellent out and sprays the shark and the shark just drops back to the ocean. That's not the way it works. Okay, you need to be prepared. There's going to be a little bit of a lag before it kicks in. If you get pepper sprayed right in the eyes, a good rule of thumb is if it goes right into your open eyes, you're going to probably lose your vision and be blind basically for about 15 to 30 minutes, give or take. Okay? It's not the most painful thing. It's not pleasant, but it's just like getting punched in the face. Once you experience it, it's not nearly as bad as you think it is if you've never experienced it before. So anyway, just something to think about. Then, when you do use it, the number one thing in my mind that I would say is spray it, then create distance, back up, retreat safely, make sure you're aware of your surroundings, give that spray time to kick in and start marinating, whether it's a human or an animal, whatever. And we're going to get into animal targets here momentarily, but give it time to kick in and do its work and sort of marinate in the sauce before you take your next step. Then you decide what to do. Typically, it's time to just get out of there then. And whether you contact the authorities or whatever, that's up to you based on your circumstances. But once the spray is used and deployed successfully, create some distance and let it do its job. In many cases, that's all you're going to have to do, and then you get out of there and go from there. Okay, now if you recall, last week, my papers here are a stack of news. We were discussing the oddity of kangaroo attacks, obviously primarily in Australia. Excuse me for one moment. Okay. Need a cool, refreshing beverage. We discussed there was this poor gentleman who was, I think, 72 years old that was just literally being beat down prison style by this large adult male kangaroo in Australia. We now are going to revisit this. We asked the question last week, since we were going over pepper spray and other deterrents, would pepper spray be effective against a kangaroo? Now, frankly, without trying to hype up fake drama, I don't know why it wouldn't be. Off the top of my head, that seems like pretty much any animal that can smell and has mucous membranes, be it human, four-legged, two-legged, marsupial, whatever. I would imagine the pepper spray at the very least is going to be an irritant. We have a story here. This goes all the way back to 2011 here at the MOA broadcast. We do our research thoroughly. We go to Canberra, Australia. 2 Australian police officers used pepper spray to fight off a rogue kangaroo that had attacked an elderly woman in her backyard in an outback town, an official said Tuesday. Kangaroos rarely attack humans. I'm going to be honest, the more of these that I find, and we're going to continue to feature these on the MOA broadcast because these are interesting and frankly, sometimes they're humorous. These kangaroos have a real bad attitude. I mean, frankly, I'm just going to be honest. I think I would kind of like to have a beer with them and get into one of these kangaroo fights and then go hang out. They got an attitude problem, but I kind of like it. That is going to be a memorable night when you go out and get into a kangaroo fight and then share a few beers with a roo and just hash it out over a fireplace. Anyway, Senior Sergeant Stephen Perkins, head of police in the Queensland state town of Charleville, if I'm pronouncing these correctly, said he had never before heard of police using pepper spray against a kangaroo, but that tactic worked. It did subdue the animal and drew its attention away for the officers, so it worked, Perkins told the Associated Press, probably before they were referring to the Gulf of America. The 94-year-old victim, Phyllis Johnson, was taken to a hospital for treatment for cuts and bruises after the attack Sunday afternoon. She told the Courier Mail newspaper that she tried unsuccessfully. At 94 years old, I am not surprised, no shame, madam, to fight the kangaroo off with a broom after it attacked her while she was hanging her laundry. I thought it was going to kill me, she told the newspaper from her bed in the hospital on Monday. It was taller than me, and it just plowed through the clothes on the washing line straight for me. She said the kangaroo knocked her to the ground before she crawled to her house, where her son called police. The animal jumped away, saw another officer at the back of the police car and went for that officer. He also deployed his spray, so the roo had to get sprayed twice. After that, it hopped away from the scene and police monitored its location. Wildlife rangers trapped the kangaroo, Perkins said. It was described as a male red kangaroo, the world's largest marsupial. Red kangaroos, named for their ginger fur, a ginger, so we know it has no soul, can stand as tall as a man and usually weigh around 200 pounds. Now, if you've seen images online of these, or in person, of these kangaroos, they have a very thick and muscular build in their chest and forearm areas. And I'm telling you, man, they have an attitude problem. They walk around and they flex their arms and they flex their chest and they just stare people down. I've seen multiple videos of it. They are not intimidated in the least by human beings. They got a real bad attitude. I mean, I kind of like it. I respect it. They know what they're about and they go get it. But I don't think I would want to fight one of these things. I mean, let me rephrase that. I would actually kind of like to a little bit. I don't think I would win, but I'm willing to take that chance because that would be a great memory to tell over some whiskeys later on down the road after I recover from my hospital stay. But these kangaroos are no joke. Okay, so now we know pepper spray is effective against kangaroos. Again, this poor lady was just putting out her laundry to dry. Situational awareness is so important. While I was preparing this broadcast, I was listening to the police scanner, and there was some poor guy in town that was shot in the chest. I don't know if he's going to survive or not. Haven't heard the update on that, but you never know what is going to happen out there. Whether it's going to be a firearms attack, a kangaroo attack, or in the case of our next story, we're going to wrap it up with a naked hiker rescued after getting stranded in suburban Los Angeles. You got to ask yourself, why? Why are you naked in suburban Los Angeles? Let's go to the story. A hiker who got lost in hills in suburban Los Angeles was pictured getting rescued while completely in the nude. Witnesses raised the alarm about around 8:45 p.m. Monday after hearing someone crying for help in Chatsworth. The Los Angeles Fire Department said, now what? You got to ask yourself, what is going on where you're walking around in a suburban, some type of suburban park or forest in these hills, buck naked, and you start crying for help? What has been going on in your life that leads you to that point where you're walking around naked? You realize after 4 hours out in the bush that you've made a serious mistake, and you start crying for help. The stranded man was found by chopper around 45 minutes later, with photos obtained by CBS Los Angeles showing him waving for help while completely in the buff. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the expression in the buff, that means buck naked. Okay, this guy was walking around some suburban Los Angeles park buck naked. The photos, which digitally obscured anything intimate, thank goodness, showed him standing with his hands raised high while under a spotlight. The unidentified man is thought to have been missing in the remote location since around 4 p.m., CBS Los Angeles said, without saying if it was known why he was naked. People heard the stranded hiker's cries for help and called the Los Angeles Fire Department on Monday. I am looking at the pictures right now online of this guy being hoisted up into a helicopter. It's blurred out, thank goodness, but it's some buck-naked guy being wheeled or hoisted. He's being hoisted up into a helicopter with a spotlight on him while I don't know what he's sitting on. That all part is blurred out. Again, thank goodness. But can you imagine what's going on? You have to be hoisted up in buck-naked fashion. Oh my goodness. He was hoisted from the helicopter by a rescuer and flown to a landing area, assessed by paramedics, before being transported to a hospital. The fire department said the hiker suffered minor injuries, but again, it was not immediately known what happened to him. Temperatures in the area range between 40 and 50 degrees on Monday, according to information from AccuWeather.com. Now, I wonder why they felt the need to include the fact that temperatures were cool that day in a story about a naked man. I guess they just ran short on things to say about the poor fellow. Okay, that's going to do it, folks. Next week, are you prepared for a bear attack? What about without a firearm? We find out how to make it out alive with just a knife next time. Okay, that's it. Remember, don't wait until you have an emergency to prepare for it. If you do, it may be too late. If you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all. Stay safe out there, folks.